So I'm very excited for this next session for the Microsoft Tech Summit panel. We're going to talk about diversity in tech, and we're going to cover a lot of ground here. And but before we jump in, let's do some quick introductions. All right. So since you have the mic, Jane, so why don't you quickly introduce yourself, your background, and all that good stuff.
Hi, so good evening. My name's Jane Lewis. I work in the Azure team in the UK. I manage a team of cloud solution architects working across our major customers in the UK. I've been at Microsoft 10 years, and I started off as a consultant working in the services part of the industry as a premier field engineer. So my background is really very much Active Directory, infrastructure, SharePoint, Exchange, and then I worked through into various management roles, and certainly this past 18 months, 2 years, it's been a hell of a ride with Azure. So it's been really exciting managing a team of cloud solution architects out there in the field with a whole range of diverse customers.
Awesome. Thank you, Jane.
Thank
Lesley.
you. Hi, I'm Lesley Crook. I was bestowed the MVP award last February, so it's been nearly a year now. And that was for my efforts for helping to roll out Yammer at GlaxoSmithKline, which has ended up to be, as I understand it, one of the largest, most active networks in the world with over 100,000.
Over 100,000.
Over 100,000 users. From that, I was invited with my IT guy at the time to Ignite, and we got to tell the GSK Yammer story. Since then, I've been hired by a gold partner, Perspicuity, and I now run user adoption workshops around Yammer and Teams.
Awesome. Thank you. Heather?
Hi, everybody. I'm Heather Mcleish. I am a services engineer at Microsoft in the Incident Communications and Coordination team, supporting the Office 365 product. My background, I'm actually trained in professional theatre. I then went into HR, and luckily enough, 2.5 years ago, I got the opportunity to go and interview and obtain the role I'm now in, and I'm now technical. It's a little bit about me. Back to you.
Awesome. So I know this topic is quite broad, but I want to start the conversation with really Microsoft's mission and mission statement, right? Microsoft's mission statement is to empower every organization, every person in the world to, what's that? To do more, absolutely. And I think that encapsulates this whole drive around being diverse, not only in technology, but really in our day-to-day interactions with people we have. So to get the conversation started, let me start with Heather, since you talked about theater. So coming into this business, to this industry, what were your initial observations? And more importantly, moving, as you've been with Microsoft, what are your current observations, kind of comparing, contrasting with respect to diversity?
So my first thought when I came into this industry was mind-blowing. It's so vast, and there's so much you can learn, and there's so many avenues you can go down, and that's part of the reason that I love Microsoft, because no matter who you are, where you've come from, what background you've got, there's technology that can help you. Moving into a service engineer role, wow, my learning curve was massive. I literally sat there some days going, oh my goodness, what have I done? I was the first woman into an all-male team, which meant that I changed the culture, I changed the viewpoint, and we've now got a 60-40% split, which is brilliant. And I'm very, very lucky that I work with some amazing, inspirational people who are very passionate about diversity and inclusion. And I'm not talking about tick box diversity and inclusion, it's diversity from every angle, every perspective. Looking at people, I mean, one of the girls we've hired in our team, she's from a non-technical background. We hired her from a bar, and she is now fantastic at her job. So you shouldn't just look at it as getting women in. It's about getting the right people into the role and making sure that we can manage to go and influence and make a difference to the world.
No, that's a great point, Heather. And Lesley, a lot of times when we think about diversity, we think of sexual orientation, race, religion, which is obviously very important from a picture of inclusion and diversity. But then there's other elements and aspects around diversity that we kind of overlook and don't think about. So I know we discussed this at large, so why don't you share your thoughts around that?
Yeah. I did forget to say that when I worked at GlaxoSmithKline, I was in the internal communications team. So my background from the pharmaceutical industry is internal communications, but I always was heavily involved in community management from SharePoint sites back to when it was front page or whatever it was called originally.
Oh, I haven't heard the F word in forever.
Way back. So that's how I ended up stepping in from internal comms into kind of like the digital space. But what I recall from going back just maybe 5-7 years ago is that in internal communications, it was all women. And now it's different because it's digital and it's a different pace now. So there's more men going into internal communications. Sure. But going back to the original question that you asked me, so going into around the user adoption space, there's not many of us that are actually doing this well around the world. But most of the really good people that are doing this are now being picked up as MVPs, and they're coming from very big organizations, and they're still there doing community management work. And a key theme that was at Ignite was around women in tech. And I thought, that's great. I think I'm now a woman in tech. But it seemed to me when I was going into those forums, it was about coders, mostly it seemed to be coders and developers. And I thought, I don't really fit here. It's like I felt quite uncomfortable that I wasn't worthy to be around these geniuses that write code and do development work. But it's something different that I'm bringing to this piece. So I've gathered together and interviewed, I think it's 11 now, called them Women in Tech interviews, and it's to gather their stories of how they've come into this space, again from very different angles. Sure. But the other thing as well is that I suddenly realised that being invited to this panel, it's not just about women in tech. That's from the viewpoint of user adoption, it's the men that are actually doing the user adoption as well. And there's Nick Ledger over there from Atkins, who has as I understand, has got a marketing background, but is now regarded as a architect for Office 365 and probably many other things. So he is now men in tech, but his actual background was marketing. And then there's Simon Denton, who's an ex-civil engineer.
That's right. So this is a very, very good and important perspective. When we think about diversity, obviously, again, men, women from different parts of the world. But then in a typical IT world, we always think about, are you an IT pro, or are you a dev, right? Or are you a services engineer? Those are the stereotypical, and maybe stereotypical is the wrong word, but more traditional model of IT skill sets and role. But the world is changing. And one of the things, like you said, is, at least for me, when I talk to potential hires and future colleagues that I may work with, is the diverse background should be welcome, should be embraced, right? Because we're in a fast-paced world, we're in a cloud world where we don't have to worry about Patch Tuesdays, right? And we're now more focused on helping the business getting their job done. So certainly, like your background's theater, your background's internal communications. I haven't said this publicly. I used to sell furniture. That's my background, right? But look, it works, right? We're putting pieces together and making solutions for the business.
Change agents.
That's right. Yeah. So, Jane, what about you? So, you've been at Microsoft 10 years, right? And what have you seen? How have you seen the transformation around diversity and inclusion, at least in this world of tech, as you interact with customers and partners and also Microsoft?
Yeah, so certainly, I've seen a huge change since Satya took over as CEO, and I can certainly sort of speak to that whole diversity piece. We've grown immensely in our team over the last sort of 3 years. We started off with 10 people, we're now up to over 120 people. And when we hired our cloud solution architects, we specifically went external for a lot of our job hires. We were looking across the broad range of industry, open source skills, people who were natively were our competitors. We actively sought them to bring that diversity of thought, action, approach, challenging into our team. We didn't want people thinking, the same way as I do potentially after 10 years at Microsoft. And we want to positively encourage, and we call it this growth mindset. We want to positively encourage that type of growth mindset. But, also as well, we do want to have this, to a certain extent, we want to obviously encourage our women in technology as well. And that is a real challenge for us in our team, because the type of people who we're hiring, cloud solution architects, are often quite mature and senior within their part of the business. And we're already sort of fishing in quite a small pool. So we are challenged with that, so we want to actually positively encourage women to actually join us. And again, I think it's beholden of the big tech companies to actually go and invest in that. And one thing which we've done in our team, for example, is that I have actually hired 5 graduates, 2 years into Microsoft from non-technical roles, and we're putting through a whole year of intense training in Azure, and at the end of it, they will join as associate cloud solution architects in our team. And it's 70% girls in that who we've actually hired to go and do that. And it's really, I feel, almost beholden to actually go and do that. Help encourage young
100%.
girls such as yourself, this young lady here, to see IT as a real fantastic job to actually come into.
Yeah, no, that's spot on. One of the things that's really impressive with Microsoft is it's not just lip service, right? It's not just saying, oh, this is our mission statement, empower every person, every organization to do more. But we see it from Satya's sincere and authentic drive to push this. From, if you read the book Hit Refresh, the idea of growth mindset, that we cannot be know-it-all, we got to be learn-it-all. We got to be inclusive. We got to learn from each other. Nobody's perfect. And failing is okay. And I feel like that's part of the diversity conversation, where there's this idea that if you're in IT, you're a geek, you're perfect, you can never fail, right? That's not true. And failing fast, failing forward, learning from it, improving, and then sharing lessons learned, that's the whole essence of growth mindset. Yes, Lesley.
Just on the theme from Satya's brilliant book, it lost me a bit at the end towards artificial intelligence and mixed reality. And
that's
everything.
right.
But his story from around cricket and just,
Yeah.
I'm new to the whole Microsoft ecosystem, so I found it absolutely fascinating. I found it real learning quickly that I read that book. But the growth mindset piece, it brings me on to a philosophy that I use day in, day out by a man called John Stepper, and the philosophy of working out loud.
Yes.
Has anyone heard of working out loud?
Yeah. That's a Yammer philosophy.
Yeah. Well, it's not just a Yammer philosophy. It's about how to live, it's work-life balance. It's doing the right things, in life, really. And I think about it all the time since I've become a real follower of his principles. And basically, it is having a growth mindset. It's 5 things that I always think about all the time. It's having a growth mindset. It's making your work visible. It's being generous with making your work visible. It's because it's, you're putting your work out there. It's about who can help you improve your work. It's about deepening relationships by chatting away on Yammer and serendipity. You never know what you're going to find out or who you're going to find that knows something that's going to help your work. And it's about, I think that's all of them, and it's networking and having a purposeful goal as well around this whole thing of why you're putting something out there on your network. And that's where I come in with my user adoption kind of approach and workshops around strategic alignment of your Yammer network. Don't just think build it and they will come. That's not a strategy, that's a prayer. And if you don't have a strategy for your Yammer network, the statistic, as I understand it, is about 16%. If you just launch your Yammer network, you'll be lucky within a year that you've got 16% engagement. You need to have a strategic alignment, and it needs to be multiplied with the culture, the behaviors and values of your company. It needs to be that.
Awesome. And any questions, by the way? I mean, this has been a great conversation. Any questions folks want to ask? Now, before I forget, again, in talking about walking the talk, Microsoft Tech Community has launched a section called Diversity and Inclusion in Tech. So make sure you check out Tech Community and join that section, and certainly carry on the interaction conversation. So far we talked about the importance of encouraging and bringing up women in technology, looking at different skill set, people from different background, having this growth mindset fail fast, fail forward, and working out loud, being open and generous about it. Now, I think one more element that's pervasive today, especially with the growth of the cloud and the proliferation of technology across all of our lives, when we think about diversity, how do we align and kind of make sense out of the imbalance, I would say, right? Certainly in our industry where we're knee deep in technology, it's all great, but there's certain industry or maybe there's certain parts of the world that are not as plugged in yet, so to speak. So any thoughts and advice on how we as technologists in the forefront can help jumpstart that and help accelerate the growth of adoption? Pop quiz, right?
I've been I don't know if this is the right answer, but something that I've been so impressed about since I've joined into this Microsoft ecosystem, and every time that, from the Ignite presentations, there was a lot there about healthcare and how Microsoft are now working with healthcare companies, with the pharmaceutical companies to fast forward the end care for living a better life. And I think it came from the fact that Satya has got a special
his son, yeah.
Yeah, his son. And I think that's become really, really important. So it's bringing these two, technology into healthcare, and it's amazing
absolutely.
Yeah, it's just absolutely wonderful.
So, certainly for me, where I've travelled to places where obviously, you just can't walk up to an internet-connected device. Where I've seen everybody seems to has is a mobile device, and you think how we've used our mobiles now over the past certainly sort of 4 to sort of 6 years. We do everything on our mobile. That has been a huge increase in terms of how we engage. From banking through to every aspect of your life, if you're looking for a new partner or etc. or whatever. But certainly, there's been some really good case studies where we've actually helped, people start up their own businesses, managing it through, mobile-centric type devices, applications, platform agnostic in those terms. So I think certainly the mobile arena is the place which we need to engage.
I mean, along that lines, right? So no matter where you go, I can confidently say, for example, Windows.
Yep.
Windows has vast penetration around the world.
Yep.
The Windows team through the Windows Insiders program are doing a lot in this arena to not only obviously improve Windows, but also promote diversity. For example, last year they had Windows Insiders Program fellowship program in Africa, where they did essentially like a Shark Tank-like initiative across different countries in Africa, and they founded a couple of startups. And one of the startups, you would think, oh, we're going to build tech and this, that, the other. It's along mobile phones, where literally somebody built a service through text. You can, as a farmer, you can ask, what's the weather the next 3 weeks? Or it will get a notification around, it's harvest season, so make sure you plant this stuff, right? So point being is, for us technologists, or even some of us who have companies, that we can get involved in some of these things and provide awareness and education and learning, I think it's very critical and important in this day and age.
But you also talked about the fact that, certainly what I've seen a great change in Microsoft as well is having that lens of diversity and accessibility. So you see the work that Jenny Lay-Fleury, for example, is doing. All of the products that we develop, all of the products that we launch, we have that lens of, how can this work with somebody who's got accessibility issues? Can they, from a point of being able to see, speak, hear, etc. So having that lens is another aspect of diversity which Microsoft really do take very seriously.
I mean, one story I can think of, especially here in the UK, right, is Emma.
Yeah.
With that
Parkinson's disease, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's
Stop the Shake. Yeah,
and
it's
it's
amazing.
through this
Emma's band, wasn't it?
Emma's band, and then it's through this initiative. It wasn't a company initiative.
It was amazing.
Somebody here in UK, one of the lead, I forgot her name.
She works for Microsoft Cambridge Research.
Cambridge, right? And she thought, how can I solve this problem? It's through that band. Yeah. So again, stepping out of your day-to-day job, but being able to figure out if there's any problem you can help and address, obviously help promote diversity and inclusion as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, we'll definitely tweet that. It's an awesome story. If you haven't seen that, it's a great, great story. That's right.
And certainly, I can't mention the customer's name, of course, but we're doing some really great work around kidney disease and diabetes, and through the use of our technology and actually in research, in actually taking our cognitive capabilities, machine learning, etc., and actually applying that to helping future research in those areas of health.
Yeah. Now, any questions we can take before we wrap up here? All right. So, words of wisdom. Any thoughts, ideas, feedbacks, tips, and tricks you can share with folks here around how do you promote better diversity and inclusion in our workplace, but also in our tech community at large? Heather?
I suppose my biggest piece of advice would be don't judge, listen. Diversity is not just going and saying, no, you can't do that. It's listening to both points of view. Somebody that's like 90-year-olds that has lived their whole life one way, speaking to a 20-year-old who might suddenly go and be offended by what they're saying, listen to both sides and educate them on what is expected now, rather than going and saying, no, you can't say that. And just be kind. Most people want to go and have fun. They want to just go out there and do something good. So if you're kind rather than judgmental, it makes it a much more diverse and inclusive place.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, it's all about good food and good wine and family and friends, right? Yeah. Thank you, Heather. Leslie.
My thoughts is for the this is a tech event, is if you are thinking about rolling out Yammer and Teams, don't think it's all down to you. Have that, arrange a meeting with the communications team, with the marketing team, with the different, be the change agent. Keep that in your mind from now. If you've never heard that phrase before, think about that's what you are going forward. And maybe when you get back to work over the coming weeks, you contact your business partner, whoever is your contact point in these different functions, and say, these are the new tools that are coming along. What is on your agenda over the next 3 months, the next 6 months, or the next year? When is the leaders conference coming up? How can you now slot in and launch these tools at the most appropriate time? Don't just think this is a good time to switch it on now without, the build it and we will come, but actually go out and ask your business, what events have you got coming up? What projects have you got coming up? What initiatives? Is there any fundraising activities that are going on in the company? Talk to HR, but now open up that business partnership with the rest of your company.
Thank you.
So I'm going to take a slightly different angle. I'm not going to talk about technology. I'm going to talk about your people, because that's really important to me. So being part of, being a hiring manager at Microsoft and hiring a team at a pretty fast rate, I say be brave. Take that risk on that somebody who doesn't quite fit into that slot. Us, certainly as a big tech company, we've got the capability to go and bring and develop and take that person on and they'll surprise you. If they've got that hunger, that eagerness, that willingness to learn, that growth mindset, then be brave. Take that risk on them. Because at the end of the day, you're going to get somebody who's going to be a great asset to your team with that diversity of thought and impetus and way of thinking, and what they bring to the table will be fantastic.
Thank you. I think for me, one closing thought I'd like to share is, technology is the great enabler. I was born and raised in the Philippines, and when the internet or World Wide Web first came out in 1994, I was so inspired and passionate about the possibilities. But because of technology, fast forward throughout my career, I got the opportunity to meet Bill Gates, got the opportunity to meet with Tim Berners-Lee, the guy who invented World Wide Web, not Al Gore. And then I got to hang out with cool people like you here, right? And there's so much more we all can do as long as we leverage technology to be that great enabler, but then we open up that opportunity to everybody else, no matter who they are, where they're from, how old they are, and everybody just needs that one shot, and we can give it to them, right? Well, all right. Well, thank you for joining. Let's give our esteemed panel a big round of applause. And thanks again for coming to Tech Summit.